buffet, 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 yeah. Pillow talk buffet, 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 pillow talk buffet, 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 yeah. Pillow talk buffet, 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 pillow talk buffet, pillow talk buffet. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pillow Talk Buffet with Jessica.
And I'm Clara, and we want to introduce you to our producer, Herb the artist.
Hi everyone, so happy to be here.
He's joining our conversation today, and I couldn't be more thrilled. What about you, Clara?
I'm so excited to have you here, so thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm a little nervous, apprehensive even, but I hope to contribute much to you guys' conversation.
No? If you don't, we'll take you in the back and blow your head off.
Oh.
Just kidding! Okay, Clara, what are we
I
talking
almost
about
fell
today?
off my chair. So I feel like we've both been noticing, and Herb, like, as a man, you can tell us if you've noticed or not, but I've noticed a huge trend lately in women on TikTok and other social media platforms, and in general, like women that I know who are now against the non-commitment culture from men more than I've ever seen in my life. And I think part of it is that we're more aware of it and the lack of effort that comes from it. And so I'm like curious, like, what your thoughts are on, like, if you've noticed that too.
I've definitely noticed it. I would like to think, without, not being an expert and such, that a lot of that has a lot to do with this culture being very inundated with, like, therapy and self-awareness and self-rehabilitation emotionally, etc., which probably wasn't a huge trend in the 90s, maybe, I don't know, but I'm just going to say, like, in the 90s and prior to, you just kind of went with it. Especially like our parents' generation and maybe their generation. You went with it, you accepted it, you made it work. And I think there's a lot more of, no, I don't want to make it work. The more I become aware of my own personal boundaries and what I desire and that I can have it, I don't have to deal with the unhealthy behaviors or attributes or inconsistencies that can come from a man who's not ready but would like to partake in
extracurricular.
Yes, correct. Yeah, you can't have, okay, can't say that. But anyway, what are your thoughts, Herb?
Have you noticed a trend, like, just being on social or anything, or women, like friends or women in general that you know? Have you noticed any trend in that, or noticed?
I've noticed a trend with folks on both sides not really wanting to be in committed relationships.
So you've noticed more that people don't want to be in committed relationships. Okay. So I've noticed the opposite. Like, but again, like, there's algorithms for social, so they're gonna target, like, me as a person and things, like content that I watch, right? So I've noticed more women on TikTok, kind of talking about setting boundaries and not accepting certain things in non-committal relationships that they maybe would have before because it's unhealthy for them and makes people feel bad. So that's interesting to me that you've seen. What are your thoughts on people that are for non-committal relationships?
That are for non-committal. I don't like it. I think that there's a lot of problems that occur in our society that stem from a lack of commitment. And, I do understand, when you are single or dating and things like that, like, you don't want to, there's a fear that you might choose the wrong person. So you want to leave yourself open to, that's my son upstairs. You want to leave yourself open to making sure that you're with the right person. I don't know, but I think that it's risky entering into a relationship and exchanging yourself with another person. It's risky, but I think that I don't know. It's not an easy thing to kind of figure out right away. But I do believe that having a committed relationship is at least essential to building and, to
I
building.
agree with you. I agree. So I'm glad, to hear you say that. I think that one big topic that's come up in at least content that I've been watching, and myself personally, is that I think it gets confused a lot. A person being insecure versus a person being in an insecure relationship, and that makes them have insecurities. Because when you're talking about non-committal relationships, there's certain things that comes with that. You can't ask certain questions because you don't have that commitment there. You can't assume that somebody's being loyal to you or treating you right because you don't have that commitment there. The value isn't there, to me anyway, in a non-committed relationship. It is very much like being in survival mode because that foundation is shaky. So I don't know if anyone wants to add to that, but I can also keep going.
It's an awful place to be in.
It's horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think that the acceptance of it is not just from one space alone. I can say for me, I've allowed myself to be in insecure relationships. I like to call them situationships, and it was allowed because of where I was with myself. Mm-hmm. And someone may be a stronger of a person, or more have more esteem, or etc., be in a different place than I was, but still allow that situationship, and it breeds that same type of insecurity, fear, whatever. It's awful altogether though. And I think this culture likes to trick itself into, it doesn't matter, it's fine. Which means you have to desensitize yourself, you have to numb yourself, you have to make allowances that ultimately eat at the core of who you are. So you're not good at it. You just betrayed yourself.
I definitely know that feeling.
Yeah.
Like I've experienced a non-committal relationship too. And the worst part is that you can't even call it a relationship, even though you put so much effort and time into it. And, I think what happens is that, usually you're in a situation where you're like, oh, well, I can't be this way because I'm also in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also not sure if I'm ready either.
Mm-hmm.
But so then what you'll do, like what I've experienced, is someone will say, you're needing too much time with me. Mm-hmm. One literal thing was you want to see me a couple times a week and you keep trying to make me dinner. Literal thing that somebody said to me. I was like, ugh. At the time I was like, shoot, that must be too much. Now I'm like, I was trying to make you dinner.
Yeah. Because I think that I've said this to you in private conversations. You have to twist. It's like trying to fit a hippopotamus in a. I don't really have it.
Like a cup.
Yes, a cup.
Yeah, so you're trying to contort yourself to
mm-hmm.
fit the situation because you want it to work, because
yeah.
you can, and I hate to say this because it's one thing that I hate admitting that I've done before.
Yeah.
But you see the potential and you're like, oh, if we could just make it to this point,
yeah.
I know it could be great, and I see all these great qualities there. So I'm going to ignore the inconsistency. I'm going to ignore the lack of effort. I'm going to ignore these things. I'm going to ignore the criticism because we're in this weird place.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
But no, yes, it would.
Yes.
It would still be all those things.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced or, you know, been in like a non-committal relationship where it was kind of more like vague or undefined?
No, I have not.
Never?
I like firm foundations. I don't like the gray. So, for me, getting a understanding, having really tough conversations up front
Mm-hmm.
are so essential. I don't know if I take the fun out of relationships, but I do look at every relationship as a business, so to speak. Making sure that everybody is onboarded properly, making sure that there's an understanding of what this is, you know, and with that, making sure that you're honest about, can you commit to this? So it's very rare where I have any type of relationship to where I don't know what this is. And I think that's important. I think it's something that if a lot of people adopted, they would be able to weed out
Yeah.
what's not for them.
Yeah.
I appreciate that about you, by the way.
Yeah. Very.
Whenever this goes out, sorry about all the DMs that are about to come in. Like, you better make your agenda clear here to the people. But it is, because there's, I think, a lot of people, and, like, one thing I want to mention is that usually, and this is something that I've, like, figured out recently, and, like, from watching so many therapy videos that we watch from, like, actual licensed therapists, is that when somebody cannot commit to a relationship, it's because they're insecure with themselves. When somebody leaves you breadcrumbs, but one term I like better than breadcrumbs is scraps.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, when people say, like, oh, they breadcrumb you, it, like, sounds like they're leading you to something, but there's nothing there.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, like, place that you guys are meeting up. There's no, like, same goal in mind where you're meeting. Like,
Mhm.
scraps to me is like you're the dog, like, sitting there and you'll just, like, you want the whole meal,
Mhm.
right? You want the whole meal,
Mhm.
but you're taking the scraps because, like, that's what they're giving you.
Yeah.
And then you're just, like, hoping for more, right? But one thing I learned, so, like, that's great, because, like, about you, it says that you're a secure person, that you're confident, that you would do well in a relationship, and that you know that you have a lot to offer. I think that usually somebody is broken, and that's just something where I always thought, like, oh, well, what's wrong with me if they can't commit to me, you know, like, in my 20s. Now I'm like, no, that's too much for me
Yeah.
to deal with from you.
I agree. And I've learned, specifically with much intention in the last, like, year or 2 years, if I'm clear with myself about what is important to me, what is needed for me, which probably will take time depending on who you are and how much you are aware of your own needs or deficits, etc. Like, determining what you can stomach, what you will allow, what you won't allow. A lot of the times the decisions I made prior to now were from, and you guys probably have heard me say this in other episodes, my own deficit. My lack of affirmation, my lack of love for myself, my poor self-esteem. Put yourself out there, Jessica. And because of that, and it wasn't like I was just taking anybody who said you cute, you know, because old men love me, child. I don't want them. But if you found that one person, you know, who gave you a little bit of attention, and it was a person that you chose in that moment, you went with what they gave you in that moment, and then you try to make everything else work instead of being sober and saying, I like you, but you don't line up with my value system. You don't line up with what I need. You're not able to provide that. If I'm sober emotionally and mentally, I'll give myself time to discover if that's what I want. But if I'm hungry, if I'm thirsty, then I'm a turn up a couple of cactus needles in water. You know, like.
I think too that a lot of times we can base things off of chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even know that it's, I don't even know that it's situational.
I want to do it to you. That's it.
Well, I don't know, like, that chemistry makes you feel like that serotonin kicks in,
Yeah.
right? Like that dopamine.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, like this
This is
feels
the one.
different. Like, then you think it's special.
Yeah, and it's not.
And so you'll ignore
Woo.
so much,
Oh.
you know?
Sorry, I'm having flashbacks.
Yeah.
Because that's what it made. Like, thinking back to the moments where I accepted, Lodabar. I accepted, like, trash. In comparison to what what I really, genuinely, truly believe I'm worth. And what I desire. What I need. But because of that thirst, that hunger, that deficit, I chose way beneath that. And you lean on that chemistry first, and then you're on a whirlwind, you're on a tailspin the whole time.
Well, I think too, if you're confused about the differences between flaws in a person and actual, like, issues. Like, if a person has a flaw, it's like you snore. You know what I mean? Like, something that you can fix. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I don't know that, I think you might go out too much. I think that, like, you suck at cleaning up after yourself. Like, stuff like that to me are flaws. Things that are actual issues in a relationship, that you take those into every relationship that you go into. If you're not working on yourself and you're not growing and trying to fix it. You know, like, being inconsistent, you're not going to just all of a sudden know how to be consistent and to make somebody feel valued by giving your time to them. Or by the reassurance, because that's another thing in non-committal relationships is there's no reassurance.
Yeah.
I don't think, unless people are like love bombing or something up front, but I haven't experienced that, so.
Who I have.
So it was something that you said earlier that normally folks in non-committal relationships are insecure.
I think that people who won't commit, well, I think probably both sides are insecure, but I do think that if a person is unwilling to commit, there's insecurities about themselves going into a relationship. Like, one, maybe they just don't want to give up their freedom. And they don't know if they'll be good in a relationship, but I don't think that a person who avoids relationships is secure.
What if they're secure in the idea that they want something temporary? So, like,
I guess if they're secure, then they're clear about that up front.
so, and I'm so glad you said that, because what I've been, another trend I've been noticing is that, especially from the males have been kind of like in this frame of mind where, you know, I want to sleep with you, and I ask for your number, you should kind of know what's up already. I'm being upfront, I'm being honest with you, you know, so don't get all like, you know, this is nothing more than just that. And they're secure in that.
Sure.
And I feel that
You're nasty.
that is, I don't know, to me, that feels like they are secure in the fact that they don't want a committed relationship. They only want something temporary because they're feeling you, you know, you're attractive, and this is what I want based on the fact that you're this.
I think if they're secure, then up front they say, just to be clear, I'm not looking for anything serious. This is what this is, and if you're okay with that, then you give consent. Like, maybe not in those, like, lame-ass terms, but, you know, I think that that's at least a conversation. You know, like, I think that if you give somebody scraps and say things or do things or hang out with them or go out to eat or go to movies or stay in the same bed together overnight, like stuff like that, and having conversations like, do you want a relationship, yes or no? And they're like, oh, like maybe eventually. To me, that's somebody that's insecure because they don't want to tell you that either they don't want it or they're like too nervous to move forward.
Yeah, no.
So to me, those are two different things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, if they're actually seemingly, you know, moving forward, but it's ambiguous, and there's always this, you know, I'm not ready yet, then yeah, there's an insecurity there that should be addressed.
Yeah.
Um,
And I see your point, because I think, like, especially like younger people, if they're super sure that they don't want a relationship and they're honest and upfront about it, I could see that being, them being secure enough to know that they don't want that yet, like based on whatever their current situation is. But I guess like getting into like our age now, like 30s and stuff, and older, I guess from my experience, it's usually someone saying like, yes, but not right now.
mm.
Has that been similar for you, Jessica, where you thought it was going to be a real thing, but there was always like some obstacle to overcome? Or
Probably the most recent situation, probably that was about a year ago. Before that, I didn't even have any kind of expectations, right? Like, I've said this before, probably in our first episode. Like, I've never had like a boyfriend. I've been in situationships, and not a ton of them. A lot of it had to do with like making a personal vow. Like when my father went back to prison when I was 17, going on 18, I was like, no man is ever gonna hurt me. So, in my mind, I kept control by, in addition to like, again, esteem issues, worth issues, value issues. I was very sheltered. All of those things. I kept control, right? If you want to have sex with me, that feels great. That's about, you're attracted to me. That's it. I had no other standards. That's how it was for a long time. So I had no expectations. Nobody wanted me beyond that anyway. And I don't want you beyond that, because then you can't hurt me. So, again, I wasn't going around humping the world. But the first guy, I feel like, who had me caught up, he had me caught up for about 7 years. He was consistent. Deep down, I wanted some consistency. But I had no idea how to attain it. So, he liked me, he showed me some, attention, whatever. I don't even want to just say attention. I knew he liked me. And I had just got out of something that was pretty tumultuous. And I was just like, whatever, what you want? You want to do it? Come on. You get it out the way. And then he didn't go away. And I liked that he didn't go away. The problem was, he was very, probably a little narcissistic. I didn't realize it at the time. And I spent a lot of time, like, securing him. If I said no, if I said I don't want to do this anymore, there was this big, show. So then I felt obligated to secure him. I felt obligated to fix it. I felt obligated to say yes when I probably really wanted to say no. It took me about 7 years, maybe 8, to let go of that. And then most recently, there was someone that I knew for a long time, and I was like, yes, this is it. But I also have to acknowledge that I was in a space where I'm like, I'm ready for something. I probably was more vulnerable than I realized, considering like what was going on with my family. And I knew this person like was fond of me, for years. So I'm like, so it was a little ego driven too. So I'm like, bet, I still led physically. I led with the chemistry. 2 months in, and I'm like, okay, I can make this work. I can build me a relationship. This person is it. 2 months later, he ghosted me. How? Right? But I did not take the time to consider where he was emotionally, mentally. I'm thinking I'm communicating effectively. I'm forward. I'm not mean. I'm not this. Like, I'm all of these great, amazing things. Not for somebody who is not ready. Not for someone who doesn't want you, because maybe you provide more than they can handle, and you thinking way more highly of yourself than you should. So my philosophy has become to be clear with what is important to me. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out why is he, and why is this, and how come. That's too much. It's too exhausting. I'm not saying it never happens. I'm not saying I'm never curious. Because I like security and I don't like the gray either. If I notice behavior that's a little and it may be like part of me that's untrusting, that's afraid of rejection, that doesn't want to be led on, that doesn't want to accidentally fall into an emotional space with somebody, and they don't feel that way about me. I am curious. I am wondering, but I try to find a home base and say, Jessica, what is it that you are not just willing to tolerate, but what's acceptable for you in your world? I love to use the analogy of the garden. What am I allowing in my garden? What do I want to grow in my garden? What do I want to give from my garden? And if it doesn't fit that, then I cannot entertain it. Then I don't make you the bad person. Then I don't make you the villain. You are in your space. You deal with what you deal with. You have the issues that you have, and they can't live here. If I spend too much time worrying about why, I'm just working myself up in a frenzy and maybe creating false narratives about me and what's wrong with me. I've spent a lot of years doing that, and I don't want to. I spent a lot of years accepting the bare minimum because I did not think well of myself. It's a constant, like, journey, especially now because I'm so fixated and focused on it, because I've spent a lot of time abusing myself physically, mentally, emotionally. And I just don't want to do that anymore. And, like, it's not okay. And then again, and I don't want to be redundant, but it's been easy to make the other person the bad guy. Mm-hmm. But there were things that I accepted. And I accepted it because I was unaware. Or I did not spend the time to cultivate what was needed in me. I grew up in church. I am a Christian. So I just want to use this example, tell this one story. That guy I was talking about for 7 years. I was breaking it off of him. I was blocking that joker every other 3 months. I was ignoring him. I was trying to do all the things to get rid of him. And I was only approaching it from like this sin mindset, right? I'm doing wrong. I'm wrong. And one day, I heard very clearly, Jessica, this is not an issue with right or wrong or sin. This is an issue of your worth and your value. It still took me years after that to come to a point where I feel genuinely worthy. But that changed something for me. Because if I kept trying to get away from it because it's wrong, I'm still not dealing with the reason I keep choosing it. It became a redundant cycle with a different face.
So speaking of that, I know something that like we've come across recently and have talked about is that when you had unmet needs growing up, a lot of times you'll choose that person or people that kind of, I guess, were similar to your caretakers because that's what love was to you. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but I've noticed that. I've noticed that with me because I've noticed that I'll pick people that are just a little bit holding back. And I have great parents, don't get me wrong, I had a great childhood, like it wasn't traumatic, it wasn't like I was abused, they took care of me, we had enough. We weren't like rich by any means, they took care of me, I was provided for, my mom was a great mom, but I think she needed me as much as I needed her, which was hard. Yeah. And so usually I find people who need me more than them. And I know I've mentioned that on other episodes that we've had, that something that's like come to me recently is that I've confused someone needing me with somebody wanting me. And especially like with my dad's not an affectionate person, but I've learned that I've accepted like a lack of affection where like, not to be like blunt, but like where like sex was the main source of affection. And like after coming out of like relationship after relationship, not that it's been that many, I'm a long-term girl, even with a situationship it was a long-term off and on thing. But I have accepted that because that was what was normal to me, and that's just me figuring it out in my mid-30s. Like I have accepted that because that was what love was to me.
I did not anticipate like expressed emotion, but I became um, I became accustomed to chasing. It was safer to chase you. I don't know if it was, and it's probably reflective of my relationship with my parents. We went and visited my dad in prison, so I had uh, scheduled and very monitored visits, and that's where I got my affection. Early on, I realized this in my 20s. I was okay with like a little bit, because that's what I got. I got a little bit. Like we go see my dad once, maybe twice a month. My mom was not super affectionate. She was very nurturing early, somewhere between like my formative years. She became like caregiver, provider only. We would say, love you, mom, and she would say, you should. My mom was great. She did what she could with what she had. So in that, to avoid a, rejection, to avoid abandonment, to avoid a level of vulnerability, because there was no one available to um, secure me. I had to secure myself. Um, so it was very convenient to choose situations that I knew I was not going to get that in. It was like nice to date, nice to fantasize about it. And sex was a primary form of intimacy. Now, as a 35-year-old woman, in my mind by myself, I can create my perfect love story. I'm terrified. What do you want? Why are you being nice to me? Get away from me, you freak. That's literally where my brain goes. Even though deep down I desire. Um, so we've discovered today on Insecure Relationships that I'm terrified. And I'm working to not be, but I'm terrified. Um, because I don't know uh, a safe space in that way. I want it, but I don't know how to attain it. I have great friendships, great relationships, and I like to think sometimes that, uh, like I have a little button for my barbed wire, and I'm like, oh, I need my barbed wire, because I don't know what this looks like. I don't know what this is, and I don't know why you're here. And I need to schedule a therapy session soon.
Well, I think like one thing too that we came across, we send stuff back and forth a lot, but is that we shouldn't settle for the wrong thing because we're too impatient to wait for the right thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that we can at least be proud that we're figuring out the difference between our needs growing up being unmet and mm-hmm. looking for that in people, and now being like, wait a second, I've never had somebody make me feel safe. Yeah. I know it's important to men, and like I'm sure Herb, you could back me up. It's important to men to feel like they can provide. Yeah. And so I wouldn't say I never felt provided for at all, but I never felt like I was provided for more than I could provide for myself. Mm-hmm. Or that I was like taken care of, because even if I saw all these great qualities in someone, it was like, okay, but we're like, mm-hmm. that's cool that you can do that. It's cool that you can like do all this stuff, and that, you know, you care about success and you care about, you know, these things, but how does that apply to me if you don't want to be in a committed relationship with me? What does that matter? You can have all these great qualities, but if you can't apply them to a relationship, you're missing out too.
And if you can't receive them, again, I was what do you want me to do? What do you need? I have to stop myself now from overgiving, from overbeing perfect. Because secretly I'm like, if I do this, it may be. But that's how if I do this right, then maybe I'll win. Mm-hmm. And then you just kind of get stuck in that cycle. So learning to receive.
And I think that learning to feel comfortable in peace is a big thing. Mm-hmm. Because when you're not used to it, growing up, or in every relationship that you've had where there isn't peace because not only, like, not that I've only had, like, insecure relationships, like, that was really just, like, one. Um, but when you never feel peace, it's weird to accept it. You don't, that's not comfortable to you. It's like, ugh, like, something's wrong. So then you are anxious and you're like, this feels weird. Something has to be wrong because there's no way it can be this. So accepting peace, I think, is also really hard to do, for me anyway. But I'd say that at least from the relationships that I've been in, and it feels gross. Like, to really think about your needs, it feels gross. Because you're like, ugh, I need stability and consistency.
Well, need was a dirty word. Don't need. If you need, they won't get met. Stop needing. Don't be needy.
Right. But thank you to Therapy Jeff, who we are huge fans of. Like, in this, maybe we can tag him in this episode or something, but we watch his stuff all the time. He said, you are not needy because you have needs. You are human because you have needs. And that really resonated with me. Because I think that, especially as women, and like maybe it's the same for men, I don't know. Actually, it might be even more so. It might be harder for men to like admit if they have needs in a relationship, because that has to feel like very vulnerable for like the person that's supposed to be like the provider and the strong person in the relationship. So maybe it's even harder to admit that. I don't know.
I think that for the most part, it's easy to like there's a template for the needs of a man, you know, respect them, you know, if you're in a committed relationship, give them sex, or, you know, I don't know, I feel like there's just like a couple of different blanket items that, you know, a lot of times are associated with, you know, this is what you need to know in order to take care of a man. But you're like, yeah, definitely men, I think that it is difficult for men to be honest about what their needs are because it could be viewed as weakness. We are conditioned to be confident. And it's not to say that, you know, a man that has needs isn't confident, but it's like a fine line, because once you start really sharing and spelling things out, it makes you feel vulnerable. And that can translate into weakness, perhaps to the other person, but you know, even within ourselves, we're thinking like, man, at the moment I share, I'm not this confident person, and I'm not gonna get the girl, or you know.
Or you're afraid it's gonna be used against you.
Exactly. So yeah, I definitely feel like men have needs, and that's a whole issue of communicating those things.
That makes sense. I think too that it's wild for me, like as a woman, to like I 100% understand that, and that's like kind of like what I was starting to think. But as a woman, and like I know like Jessica, like you can relate to this too. We're like, okay, even for the wrong person, we're like, you have these needs, okay, boom, shapeshifter.
Yeah.
I will shapeshift. I will show you that.
I will learn, baby. I will learn.
I'll
how
learn,
to
and
cut
I think
hair,
that we're
cross
so
the bridge. Yeah, all the time.
we're accustomed to showing the wife before we need to, instead of
What
like.
does that mean?
I think that like with women, and I'm not trying to speak for everybody. I'm not, because like I know some women are like good at like dating. I've never had to like do that, so I'm not like sure about it yet. We'll talk about that someday. But I think women are usually trying to show what they would be like as a wife or as a committed relationship. Like, let me show you what your future could be like, so that you're invested. And that's something I've done that I'm going to have to completely unlearn. But I don't know that like men have to do that so much unless they're really like serious and looking for a committed relationship. I don't know that they do that so much. But when we hear men's needs, or at least I've done this, you're like, okay, you need more time to yourself, space.
Yeah.
You don't want me to cook you dinner? Okay. You don't want me to be mad that you're busy? Okay. I'll just ignore all my feelings and needs because they don't matter as much as yours, obviously.
Yeah.
And that's just what I've experienced as far as insecure relationships, not like my marriages and stuff.
Yeah. I didn't experience that too much except in the last godforsaken situation. Again, the guy, the most relevant one was the 7-year stint. And like I said, I was always pushing him away because I wanted to get away from it, but I felt responsible to fix it. I felt responsible to meet his need. I felt responsible, and so in some ways, it was reflective of the codependent relationship I had with my mom. He, I say I don't want to, I don't like this, and he throws a fit, and I'm like, okay, never mind. And so that it was a lot of that, right? Like I didn't have to fight to be wanted, even if the desire for me was very self-centered for him. So that was a very exhausting 7 years, because I didn't know how to say no and stick to it. I felt guilty for saying no. I would have periods. My mom passed away July 17. We were involved. And I would have periods after that where I would be sad or I would just feel away or express it. And he would take it personal. And I'm like, and I was frustrated with myself because I couldn't walk away and mean it. He was emotionally and verbally abusive, and I stuck and I dealt with it. And I was angry that I did not know how to walk away from it. In this most recent scenario, it was a lot of love bombing. He was very affectionate and very accepting right away. But he did not have the emotional capacity to deal with what I need. And again, I don't put it all on him because I chose very selfishly. I chose based off the safety of he would choose me back. So I am committed now, even though I'm terrified and have my barbed wire button on deck. I want to be clear about what I need and what I want. I'm intellectual. I'm not. I like intellectually stimulated conversations. I like reason with me emotionally. You know what I mean? I'm not. There are things that I denied or was not aware of or did not come to an awareness of until this last scenario, because somewhere worse was beginning to bloom, but I wasn't in alignment with it yet. So I was still choosing in a fashion that was reflective of me needing to still prove that I'm good enough, mostly to me. I don't know what it looks like to transition and somebody come and meet me where I am, but I told myself I have to stop stepping off of my own pedestal. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but but I have to stand in the space and say, Jessica, you are worthy, you are good enough. And if nobody tells you, you have to know it. Otherwise, you'll keep fighting for a love that you already have. And I don't know, maybe I'm romantic and poetic by nature. So maybe the right relationship or the right person would just kind of add to that. I don't know. Again, I've never really experienced this. So I don't really know. But I know that what I create for myself, I want it to be peaceful. And if I bring someone in my space and it's tumultuous and turbulent because of the climate that they have on the inside of them, I can't do that anymore. I am not willing to, because trying to meet your unrealistic need empties me to no end. And it's assault. One of the things that I've been saying to myself is I am sacred. The word sacred denotes like connection with God, and like if something is sacred, you don't treat it any old kind of way. I can't wait for someone to treat me. If I treat me sacred, then maybe you come learn. I ain't got time. You know what I'm saying? To like try to convince. I need to know for me.
Or to teach.
Or to teach. That's it. Teach. I don't want to teach you, and I don't want to teach an empty vessel. And I don't mean, again, I don't mean that in a like a derogatory or you're awful, you're pauper kind of way. I just mean like if this is not where you are in your life, I cannot fraternize with you, and I have to stop doing that to myself.
And I think once you've dealt with somebody that really shows no intention of growing, even if they say they have a great intention of growing, once you notice it, it's impossible. You can throw all of your fuel onto the fire, and it is just, nothing's going to take. And if somebody is screaming to you, or you verbally saying, or showing you that they have no intention of changing anything, then there is no point. Because if you can't grow with someone, you grow apart from them.
You want me to read what we found?
Not yet. We'll end with that yet. We're almost done. One thing I want to mention, unless you have something to add.
No,
Oh, okay.
but I like the conversation.
One thing I wanted to say is that my therapist is really good at metaphors. And when we started talking, we were talking about insecure people versus insecure relationships or insecure relationships. Insecure people in general will be like critical towards other people. You know, like they're never going to feel better until they work on themselves. Insecure relationships are, you know, when you're not putting equal value, the foundation is shaky. And something that my therapist used was like a janky bridge. Like a person that is insecure will jump to conclusions or jump over the bridge or drive a rickety car over the janky bridge or do dangerous things that make them feel bad anyways. An insecure relationship will only make you do those things because you're pushed to the limit. You know, certain things that like might look insecure. But something I thought, because I like to relate everything to food, is that like if you're in a relationship, like companionship is important. And I was making a BLT one day. I like BLTs a lot. And I was thinking of like my own analogy for it. Because like if you're in a real relationship and you're in a committed relationship and you're both putting in the effort, like say you're cooking together, right, and you're making BLTs, you might like Miracle Whip. I want a gag. I like mayo. I'm a mayo person. That's what I want on my BLT. You might like no tomato. I like my bacon overcooked. Like all these things, like you have to be able to be flexible and go back and forth between certain things, just like if you're cooking a meal. Like you're not both going to like everything exactly the same. If you do, cool. But if not, then you have to be able to like sway a little bit. But at the end of the meal, right, like you're still making the BLT, even if like one doesn't have a tomato, bacon's different, the mayo Miracle Whip situation, still I want to gag at Miracle Whip. But the foundation is still the same of that meal. You're just like changing a few things, not changing foundationally what you're eating for dinner or lunch or whatever meal you're making it for. You're just changing a few things because you're being flexible to meet the other person's needs. If you were like, I don't care if you like your bacon overcooked, I'm undercooking it and it's going to be chewy, you have to chew on all the fat. You know, like you have to do all these things to make the meal only right for one person. You know, and this is probably like a dumb analogy.
No,
I can probably edit it out, but like that made sense to me because like I think in the insecure relationship, it's only one side. It's like you have to eat this the same way I'm eating it. And if you don't, like, that's fine, because I'm not changing anything. So just eat it my way or no way. And, like, someone that is like, something is better than nothing will be like, fine, I'll eat it your way.
You don't have to agree. And maybe it'll take a minute for you to realize I don't have to agree. But when you feel like a little bit of chicken is better than the whole chicken, I'm going to take it. I don't know what it is with this food analogy situation you got going on here, but like, when you have, it's poverty, it's a impoverished mindset. Let me get what I can get. You don't have to. Let me tell you, you don't have to. And it may take some work with self to feel empowered enough to say no. But you don't have to.
Because the energy and the effort that you pour into something that you're not getting anything back out of, or it's like so uneven that you're like, when will this change? You could be pouring into yourself.
Yeah, and I promise it feels good. Some days it be a little lonely, you know. But the peace, the courage, the healthy control.
Mm-hmm.
Waking up wondering, am I gonna hear from somebody today or not?
Mm-hmm.
Waking up, just being in a cycle of abuse is not fun. So being able to decide what you want to do to fill your own cup is very liberating. And it takes some practice. Everything takes practice. Take it from the most impatient person in the world. I want to know how long it's going to take, when, and all the things. But it's really just creating that romantic life for yourself, by yourself. It may not sound like the most fun thing, especially if you're like a serial dater, or you go from relationship to relationship, or you use another person to fill your bottomless pit. It may not feel fun at first, but beautifying your world is worth it.
And I think it's important to remember that even a person that isn't self-aware enough to know that they're doing this, if somebody is giving you scraps, they're so insecure that they have to stay above you.
Mm-hmm.
They will manipulate you and keep you asking and coming back for more because they need to stay above you.
Yeah.
And that took me a really long time to figure out.
Yeah. So we found this quote. I can't remember who sent it to whom. But
it's in our messages.
It's on Instagram, and the person's page is I am J Torres. And can I just say before I read this, in a culture that is so denying of love, I like her that in the beginning you said, like, commitment is important to society, to generations, right? Like, and this culture is so anti-everything. It can be so anti. Mm-hmm. So if you are into love, if you are into partnership, if you are into romance, if you are into creating and building a life with someone, like, that's okay. I remember I would be at a point sometimes where I felt ashamed of that, you know, because there's so many things, like, be by yourself, you can love yourself, you can do, both can be true. Mm-hmm. Okay, I just want to say that before I read this.
I think that it's, like, natural, too, for a human to want companionship.
Relationship is, like, necessary. Like,
and if you, for people that don't,
okay, girl.
Well, if you don't want companionship, then don't let somebody believe that you do.
Yeah.
Because that's, you know what I mean, you're not helping anybody. If you want companionship, then you have to be flexible. And you don't have to change foundationally who you are as a person. If somebody's trying to do that, that's toxic. But as far as changing your behavior because it affects someone that you're trying to be, like, companioned with emotionally, like, if it affects somebody negatively, then I think it's, you know, worth working on. So if you want that.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I am J Torres. Right. You deserve to fall in love with someone who is genuine. Someone who is patient with your fears, your insecurities. Someone who asks if you're doing okay because they can feel you from a distance, no matter how far. A soul connection. Someone who expands your mind and opens your eyes to new perspectives. Someone who gives you all of their attention in a healthy way. In a way that makes your heart say, I am home. In a way that makes your heart say, this love is worth fighting for. You deserve to fall in love with someone who drives you to see the beauty in every sunrise and the blessing in every sunset.